What if the supposedly gloomy times weren't as terrible as history books depict them? What if there was a world illuminated by the gleam of rich metals, a golden light behind the dust of records full of battle, plague, and ruin? Imagine a country in Gaul where gold was more than just a valuable item to be kept in a safe place, not just one with muddy roads and damp stone fortifications. The map of power itself could be redrawn with this subtle weapon, from shining Byzantine solidus coins to graves filled with gold-crowned regalia and jewel-studded weapons. Every artifact in the possession of the Merovingian monarchs was a piece of history. It has been buried by history. This is not merely a story about wealth. It tells the story of how gold became the unseen lifeblood that kept the whole political and economic system going. From huge coronations to whispered negotiations between lords, gold was both the proof of authority and the promise of stability in an age of turmoil. And we might discover that this light never really went out when the curtain of the Dark Ages is drawn back. It's only been waiting for the right time to shine again on mysteries that haven't been fully revealed for more than a millennium. Europe did not immediately descend into the abysmal gloom that so many textbooks still depict when the Western Roman Empire formally fell in 476. The Roman roads, which crossed rivers with bridges strong enough to support the weight of war horses' hooves, and hoogwagons, were still in place. There were still remnants of urban life in the cities. However, they were now deserted. The primary machinery of power itself disappeared more quickly than either architecture or the law. The strictly regulated gold flow that was previously governed by Rome's tax structure vanished along with it. There was no loss of the precious metal. It only shifted direction, looking for new hands capable of defending it, negotiating with it, and ruling over it. The authority gap was immediately apparent in Gaul, a region that had previously been an essential component of Rome's military and administrative system. Once connected to Roman commercial centers, small towns now needed to find their own guardians. The Franks from the north and northeast were forced into that gap by the rise of local warlords. They were acquainted. For many years, Frankish groups had been used as mercenaries in the Roman army, hired as border guards, or granted land in return for their allegiance. However, the distinction between an ally and a conqueror became hazy when the old order fell apart, and they started determining the land's destiny for themselves. In the hands of Frankish rulers, gold instantly turned into a weapon of control. It was not just treasure to be confined to. It was a way to show off prestige in front of allies, cultivate loyalty, and buy off old adversaries. There were numerous ways to obtain gold, including looting rich southern cities and trading over great distances, and trading Provencal wine, Baltic amber, and Lorraine salt for Danubian silver or Byzantine gold. Each coin that came back from a market stall or a campaign served as a bridge that connected politics, economics, and war. The young leader of the Salon Franks, Clovis, began using a twofold strategy to start expansion campaigns by the end of the 5th century. Conquer to gain wealth, then utilize that wealth to solidify his authority. He ensured that loyal warriors would continue to battle under his banner by rewarding them with riches and luxury items. Chieftains that were defeated received golden privileges, changing from adversaries to vassals or allies. Clovis believed that gold must continue to move. It was unable to remain motionless, since his strength was constantly refreshed and expanded. As it passed through his hands, gold was now playing two parts at once. On the one hand, it was a financial metric that could be exchanged for any material worth. On the other hand, it was an obvious symbol of power. A little jewel-studded crown, a sword with complex carvings, or a gold-brooched cloak may convey a message more powerful than any written agreement. The common people felt comfortable in the face of political upheaval because they were reminded of Rome's wealth and order when they saw gold in the hands of their rulers. Religious rituals also shone with gold. Altars with chalices that have been plated, priests' garments with gold thread trimmings, royal rites carried out with ceremonial swords and crowns reflecting light. In addition to carrying on Roman custom, that presence strengthened the new dynasty's legitimacy. More significantly, local artisans started striking, shaping, and engraving gold in Gaul at this time. The first tis coins, which served as both money and a political statement, included the names and symbols of Frankish monarchs. A new kingdom was emerging, and the old order had vanished. The Merovingian story took shape in that golden light, marking the beginning of a time when this valuable metal would serve as the foundation of future generations' power, trade, and heritage. The distinct advantage of the region soon became evident as the Franks strengthened their control over Gaul. It was located right at the intersection of almost all of Western Europe's main commercial routes. Amber, furs, and beeswax were transported down the Rhine and Meuse by river fleets that arrived from the north. Along the ancient Roman routes, wine, olive oil, and Mediterranean pottery traveled northward from the south. Salt and dried fish from the Atlantic coast made their way deep inland from the west, and while traders and diplomats traveled eastward, Byzantine gold and Danubian silver trailed behind. Gaul was more than just a transit hub for cargo. It had its own strategic resources, including iron and lead from the massive central, the salt mines of Lorraine, and the lush Seine and Luis River basins that provided food for thousands of people. Gaul was a center for the storage and redistribution of precious metals, despite its lack of natural gold reserves. Gold had passed through here as part of the economic bloodstream of the Roman Empire. That current persisted under the Franks, now led by a dynasty that understood how to channel it for its own benefit. During what is sometimes referred to as Europe's chaotic age, Gaul's economy was exceptionally durable due to its stable agriculture, abundant natural resources, and strategic trade routes. The Frankish crown, which straddled the Germanic north and the Latin south, served as the gatekeeper for the movement of gold and goods across the continent. This post offered not only material prosperity, but also political leverage. Anyone who wanted to trade, form an alliance, or just find peace had to go through this gate. Gold was more than just money to the Merovingians. It was the diplomatic language. When a Lombard or Visigoth delegation arrived at court, they would be ceremoniously greeted and sent home with newly struck gold coins and jeweled trinkets or weapons, presents that conveyed generosity while showcasing the giver's power. Crowns, thrones, sword hilts, and ceremonial robes were all covered in gold during royal coronations and burials. The quality was what made me stand out. With a level of accuracy rarely found, Gaulish goldsmiths created whirling designs and cloison inlays of garnet or colored glass by combining Roman techniques with Germanic and Celtic traditions. For this reason, artifacts made of Merovingian gold were both symbolic and valuable. The Merovingian Gauls became well known throughout Europe. Anglo-Saxon businessmen, Scandinavian chieftains, Byzantine envoys, and Arab merchants all knew it as an open treasure box. The pathways that gold traveled and, consequently, the economic lifeblood of half the continent were under the power of whoever held Gaul. However, like a candle in the night, wealth attracted both internal conflicts and distant hands. In actuality, Gaul became more and more of a battleground for ambition as it grew wealthier. The Merovingian royal family's branches fought about who should control the gold supply. Each group aimed to control mineral riches, profitable trade routes, and the authority to impose taxes along the rivers. These rivalries encouraged outside intervention in addition to destabilizing the realm. One person stood out in this unstable environment as having the capacity to transform Gaul's economic potential into overwhelming political power. More than just a skilled fighter, Clovis knew that gold could be used wisely to create a dynasty. As strong as rock, this marked the beginning of a new chapter in the tale of Merovingian gold, one of alliances, conquests, and choices that would influence a whole era. The Franks were still a loose group of tribes divided into two main branches. When the name Clovis thundered across the map of European dominance, the Ripuarian Franks further up the river and the Salon Franks along the lower Rhine, they lived among the indigenous people who were impacted by the ruins of Roman cities that were still serving and were dispersed along the main rivers of northern Gaul. Their connection with the Roman world was a combination of cooperation and hostility. In exchange for land and settlement rights, many Frankish clans served as mercenaries in the imperial army. However, they seized land by force without hesitation when the chance presented itself. The distinctive mark of a warrior culture was seen in their civilization. The head of each community served as both the war captain with the sword and the distributor of the loot. Each community was an extended clan. There were hardly any written laws. Reputation, generosity, and the capacity to protect money for one's followers were used to gauge power. Gold, particularly Roman gold, was essential in such a setting. It created strategic intertribal marriages, bought better weaponry, and retained warrior loyalty. The benefit of their location was immediately apparent to the Franks. In order for traders from the North Sea to reach the deep interior of Gaul, they controlled important river segments. A consistent supply of precious metals was obtained through toll collection, trade, and occasionally selective raids. In order to preserve allegiance, some of this gold, silver, and jewelry was promptly redistributed. For significant rituals, a chieftain's funeral, the heir's wedding, or a treaty securing the promise of peace, the finest and most priceless pieces were saved. Notably, the Franks had already established a distinctive style for gold work before there was a single country. Artifacts from the 4th to 5th centuries were the first to use the cloison process, which involved cutting the metal surface into tiny cells with thin gold strips and then inlaying gemstones or colored enamel. In addition to being ornamental, many sword hilts, rings, and brooches served as symbols of tribe, identity, and authority. Symbols of strength and the owner's fate. Animal themes, like hunting birds, horses, and wolves, were either studied with stones or carved in relief. However, their biggest weakness turned out to be precisely this division of authority. Conflicts between Frankish tribes were common, particularly when it came to control of important mineral resources or profitable trading routes. Every leader governed his own domain and adhered to his own authority. None were powerful enough to enforce a common law. Because of this, they were exposed to stronger forces like the Bindians in the east or the Visigoths in the south. In this context, many warriors and nobles harbored an unconscious craving for a figure who might bring the dispersed branches together. The stage was set for a new player when political and theological upheavals from the Mediterranean reached Gaul, coupled with opportunities offered by the weakening of opposing powers. Intertribal marriages, short-term agreements, and minor conflicts developed as test runs for a larger unity. He was a young Salon branch chieftain who was adept at both fighting and using gold to rule. He would use wealth to gain loyalty rather than relying solely on force, turning gold from loot into the basis of authority. Clovis would accomplish what earlier generations had only imagined, bringing the Franks together under one roof and reframing gold's place in a kingdom as the foundation of a new order that would last for generations rather than as a show of wealth. Clovis inherited more than just a divided territory and the title of chieftain when he came to power in the late 5th century. The strategic inheritance that had been meticulously crafted by Franks for decades was what he actually received: a network of trade channels, partnerships still being tested, and a reserve of wealth large enough to convert ambitious ideas into reality. Clovis soon showed that he was more than just a proficient fighter. Based on this foundation, he was a monarch who knew how to turn riches into the lifeblood of the kingdom's political apparatus and a builder of power. Clovis's initial battles with Philomae demonstrated how he combined sword and money. Every victory brought with it war, booty, but instead of letting it sit in the treasury, he dispersed it with purpose, in order to ensure their steadfast loyalty. Devoted warriors received lavish rewards. Defeated leaders were turned from adversaries into vassals by receiving gold and privileges if they were prepared to submit. Gold was never static riches under Clovis. It needed to flow. Additionally, it conveyed the power of the one in charge as it flowed. Clovis' conversion to Catholicism in 496 was the biggest political turning point. This was a brilliant diplomatic move, rather than just a religious declaration. Clovis established new trade routes and bolstered his authority among his subjects by putting himself under the spiritual aegis of the Church, a force that was quickly expanding its power throughout Gaul. Once more, gold was a key player. In addition to being political investments that guaranteed the support of the clergy and established strong connections with the spiritual centers of power, lavish donations to the church showed piety. Clovis ruled over almost all of Gaul after his resounding victory over the Visigoths, 8 VY in 507. The Frankish treasury was flooded with cash from the prosperous southern cities, including gold from the Visigothic royal hoard. Clovis intended to establish a system of circulating coinage and valuable goods that was influenced by Rome and Byzantium, but had a distinctly Merovingian identity. In contrast to many tribe chiefs who retained gold as personal property, Clovis' image and insignia started to appear on gold coins that served as both money and symbols of sovereignty. They negotiated commercial agreements, fixed the value of products, and paid wages to warriors. Issuing one's own coin was a clear indication that the Frankish kingdom was an autonomous center of power in a Europe that was changing after the fall of Rome. Clovis was also aware that gold might use concrete symbols to inscribe his name into popular memory. For religious festivals, regal festivities, and military victory celebrations, he commissioned exquisitely wrought gold ornaments. Gold reflected both actual light and the idea of a king who was both a warrior and a nation builder. Beneath the candles of churches, Clovis left behind a sizable realm and a well-defined system of authority. When he passed away in 511, gold was the instrument that strengthened authority, molded politics, and cemented allegiance. That idea persisted as a golden thread running through the Merovingian dynasty, despite the fact that his sons split the kingdom among themselves. The narrative then moved into a new stage, a heritage that the Franks would carry on and build upon in the ensuing century, one in which gold was not just the money of conquest, but also the benchmark of power itself, determined by stability and prestige. By the 6th century, the Merovingian dynasty had inherited from Clovis not only a united kingdom, but also a currency based on gold. This was a calculated move that strengthened their position in an unstable Europe following the fall of Rome. Gold maintained its enduring worth and widespread acceptability during a time when governmental stability was at best precarious, serving as the common tongue of commerce and diplomacy. The Merovingian rulers recognized that confidence was the foundation of a currency's strength. As a pledge to their subjects and international allies, they kept their gold coinage heavy and pure, just like Rome and Byzantium had done. The model was the well-known and stable Byzantine solidus. The majority of the gold in use at first came from coins sent back from war, loot, or solid imports. However, in order to maintain a reliable gold standard and to assert their authority, Merovingian mints eventually started creating trimesses, which are 1/3 of a solidus, with the names and insignia of Frankish monarchs on them. It was not merely a technical choice taken in the minting halls to uphold that quality. It was a statement of politics. The might of the dynasty was demonstrated by a gold coin that maintained its worth year after year. Arab traders or Lombard Visigoths understood they were dealing with a reliable kingdom when they held a Merovingian gold piece. This trust turned into soft capital, giving the Merovingians economic clout that extended well beyond their governmental boundaries. However, maintaining that quality was never easy, due to long-distance trade, war, looting, and the recycling of valuable items. Gold supplies were erratic, in order to make sure that gold entered the kingdom more quickly than it left. The Merovingian monarchs had to establish treaties with areas that were abundant in precious metals and actively increase trade links. To avoid supply shortages, trade routes from Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, and Africa have to remain open. Every gold coin also has symbolic value. The ruler's image or insignia, frequently combined with a cross or a military symbol, was meticulously etched on its face. Coinage became one of the few visual means by which the king could communicate with subjects. He would never personally meet in a culture where the majority of people lacked literacy. The domestic economy was also altered by the gold standard. A uniform transaction system was established by pricing commodities and collecting taxes in gold, which lessened the need for barter or regional currencies made of silver and bronze. The emergence of a merchant and artisan class was fueled by the fact that major cities, markets, and trade hubs frequently developed around mints or tax collection locations. However, the Merovingian economy was susceptible to unexpected shocks because of its reliance on gold. A lack of gold would have an immediate effect on prices, earnings, and government credibility if supply routes were disrupted by war, raiding, or natural disaster. To maintain the unbroken flow of gold, Merovingian kings had to continue to be proactive, willing to gain new allies or expand their domain. Even when other parts of Western Europe suffered from monetary crises, the Frankish kingdom was one of the most stable economic hubs throughout the height of the gold standard. However, gold was more than simply money in the Merovingian culture. They were changed into ceremonial, symbolic, and artistic artifacts, metal objects whose worth greatly outweighed their weight. And the next chapter in the history of royal power would begin with these constructions. Merovingian gold coins could initially appear to be just a way to make payments. However, they also functioned as metal pronouncements in the 6th and 7th centuries, sending forth messages about the dynasty's dominance, stability, and might. In addition to having a monetary worth, each coin served as a visual communication tool, with each line and symbol carefully chosen to uphold royal authority. Marrying tremazes and solids initially had a distinctly Byzantine influence, as did bust portraits in the classical style, the Christian cross, and other religious symbols that were widely used in the Christian world. Passive imitation was not what this borrowing was. It served as a sign that the Frankish kingdom was one of the major powers of the time. Coins with Christian emblems also conveyed a clear message to a populace that had recently become Christians. The king's secular power was a result of heavenly blessing. The Merovingian kings gradually started adding more regional components to their designs, crowns, warrior insignia, or animal motifs that stand for power and protection are used in place of the royal portrait on some coins. Germanic interlacing patterns, round shields, and sword hilts were among the details that combined with classical shapes to create a hybrid design that appealed to both local pride and foreign traders. Coinage was one of the few ways a king could interact with tens of thousands of subjects he would never see in person in a culture where the majority of people were illiterate. In addition to having monetary worth, holding a gold coin bearing the royal mark also gave one a small portion of the ruler's power. The king's image could travel with that coin from a warrior's palm to a borderland market and into the pouch of a far-off merchant. Gold coins' symbolic value frequently outweighed their monetary value. Merovingian coins could be retained as mementos or talismans in remote areas far from the centers of authority, where gold was not utilized for daily transactions. As an offering to the afterlife, a tremesis may be sewn into ceremonial robes, strung into a necklace, or buried. Gold coins were carefully selected presents in diplomacy, presenting newly struck shiny coins bearing distinctive royal emblems to incoming envoys from the Lombard, Anglo-Saxon, or Arab world was more than just a gesture of goodwill. it served as a means of spreading the Merovingian image outside the boundaries of the kingdom. Every coin turned into an enduring, silent ambassador. The gold standard previously discussed was also maintained by the Merovingian coinage's steady repute across succeeding reigns. Without weighing or verifying each piece, remote merchants might trust the worth of a product when its design and weight remain constant. But there was a risk involved with that very distinction. In order to establish their own dominance, local chieftains or regional rulers occasionally created replicas of Merovingian designs with minor modifications. Merovingian gold coinage at its height combined visual messaging, political prestige, and material worth. It served as a propaganda vehicle as well as an economic instrument, guaranteeing that the royal image was seen in areas that were inaccessible to administrative or military control. Furthermore, gold would not stop at coinage once it had become a language of power. Crowns, weapons, and ceremonial treasures would all be illuminated by that golden light, and their value would be determined not only by the weight of the metal, but also by its ability to inscribe royal authority in the collective memory. If gold was the language of power in trade and diplomacy, then it was the most persuasive tool of all in Merovingian royal rites. A light that elevated authority to a hallowed status and made it nearly impossible to question. Gold was more than just opulent decor during coronations, funerals, and important diplomatic gatherings. Every instant of the ritual was transformed into a performance of both material grandeur and metaphorical importance by the aura that surrounded it. The hefty, stiff coronets of subsequent dynasties contrasted with a Merovingian crown. It was, frequently, a flexible piece of priceless metal, occasionally adorned with jewels or suspended from delicate gold chains that wavered in response to the king's steps, releasing light as he went. Beneath the blaze of church candles, these features reflected more than light. They demonstrated a conviction that the king's authority originated in both heaven and earth, belonged to humanity, but was protected by God. Another golden proclamation was royal apparel. The king's and queen's garments were made from materials brought in from Syria or Byzantium, stitched with gold thread and occasionally embellished with thin gold sheets. The amazement of the throng and the echo of applause wrapped the king's entire figure, which appeared to be a living mass of gold as he entered a church or large hall. This wasn't just a luxury, it was a proclamation that the dynasty might return their golden light to the center of power by reaching into the most distant trading networks. Gilded insignia were also created from ceremonial swords. The king's sword served as a symbol of justice and authority, in addition to being a weapon of battle. Its scabbard and hilt were carved with religious or mythical patterns, inlaid with gemstones, and coated in gold. In addition to military might, a general's receipt of such a sword from the monarch also signified the transfer of some of the crown's reputation, which was preserved in the glint of precious metal. In the realm of religion, gold was used in altar crosses, chalices, relics, and royal gifts to the church. These items were frequently made of solid gold or heavily gilded and embellished with gems. In addition to demonstrating piety, these works strengthened the connection between religious and royal authority. A Merovingian king's gift of gold to the church was a transaction of influence as well as devotion. The church responded with spiritual, light and legitimacy. While the dynasty provided material light, gold was used even during royal burials. Jewelry, gilded weaponry, and personal ceremonial items were placed in a casket with the king's body. In this case, gold represented not only status, but also the assurance that the king's might would endure in legend and remembrance long after his body had crumbled to dust. These components came together to create a golden language that transcended money and earthly wealth. It informed the populace that the king was the head of a universe organized by both divine favor and earthly force, and that he controlled not simply with soldiers and the rule of law. And this light did not remain confined to palace or cathedral. It traveled around Europe with soldiers, traders, and envoys. Merovingian gold would then set out on yet another adventure. In addition to decorating the throne, they established golden ties that connected their authority to the continent as a whole. Palaces and cathedrals were not the only places where the Merovingians' golden light shone. It became the kingdom's lifeblood as it expanded via roads, rivers, and harbors. Every shipment and trade route served as a vital link between Gaul and the other early medieval European power centers. Gold did not just pour out, it also came back with new realms of influence, alliances, and stories. The Mediterranean served as the majestic entrance to the south, all loaded with salt, wine, furs, and regional commodities. Ships sailed out of the ports of Provence and Marseille, and returned with opulent goods from the Levant and Byzantium. The treasury of both monarchy and aristocracies enriched when Byzantine gold, which was renowned for its purity and splendor, entered Gaul during the Homewood expedition. It was not just goods that were traded at these ports. They carried diplomatic letters, political intelligence, and hushed alliance pledges. Anglo-Saxon, Frisian, and Scandinavian traders brought amber, furs, honey, and beeswax to Barda from the North Sea and the Baltic, which opened into another world. In this case, gold served as both a payment and a symbol of friendship. To bring a physical symbol of an alliance encased in costly metal back to his tribe. A northern leader may depart Gaul with a necklace adorned with gemstones or a golden brooch. Gold poured onto the Danube from neighboring countries to the east, across the Rhine, and via overland channels in Burgundy and Alemannia. This route connected Gaul with Italy's and even Constantinople's trade centers. Along this road, mercenaries, envoys, and merchant caravans brought presents in addition to merchandise. Merovingian gold is valued for its exquisite design and consistent worth. The backbone of internal trade, the inland routes along the Lier, Seine, and Rhône were as significant. Riverside settlements developed into hubs where local merchants and long-distance tradesmen exchanged gold. In this sense, Merovingian coins brought the king's image to areas where political power had not yet penetrated, reaching both the nobility and remote rural marketplaces. To control the golden routes was to control the political and economic pulse. The rulers of Merovingia were fully aware of this, placing patrols to defend the caravans, tax posts, riverbank castles, and guards at key locations, to guarantee that the flow of gold continued uninterrupted. Many of the most crucial sections were directly supervised by the monarchy. However, there were perils associated with wealth. Mediterranean pirates, northern highwaymen, and stubborn local lords might all shut up a path. The royal coffers and merchants' faith could be shaken by a single massive attack or a port blockade. The Merovingian policy, therefore, combined three components. Strong relationships are maintained through diplomacy. The routes are protected by military action, and circulation is maintained through economic measures. Because of this equilibrium, the Merovingian gold network benefited both trade and power projection. A silent, timeless message was conveyed by each coin that traveled hundreds of miles. No matter where its gold arrived, the Frankish dynasty was there. After securing this stream, Gaul had an unprecedented period of wealth that even foreign envoys acknowledged was unparalleled in Western Europe. The gold network that the Merovingians had steadily constructed reached its zenith when the 6th century gave way to the 7th. Now, Gaul was the golden center of Europe, attracting precious metals from all over the continent and distributing them outward through trade routes fortified by legal regulation, military defense, and diplomacy. Even foreign envoys publicly admitted that the royal treasury had grown to an extent that was unrivaled in the West. The Merovingian court provided a platform for showcasing luxury in major cities like Paris, Switzerland, and the Met. Stone halls were lit by hundreds of candles during large events. Solid gold wine goblets carried from hand to hand. Pearl and gold necklaces draped around the necks of noblewomen, and cloaks embroidered with gold thread all reflected their radiance. There was more to each meal than just food, with each item thoughtfully picked to convey the idea that this dynasty's wealth was so immense that nothing could top it. It was a display of power. There was much more to the royal jewels than money. Large jeweled crosses, golden-cased relics inscribed with saints, superbly crafted chalices, and gifts from far-off courts, Egyptian gold necklaces, Byzantine mosaics, and gold-embroidered silks from Persia were all found inside the vaults of palaces and royal churches. A military campaign, a treaty's signature, or the evidence of a fruitful political union were all associated with a particular artifact. The stamp of gold was even on the architecture. Churches under royal sponsorship often had golden tesserae on their mosaics, transforming interiors into spaces that seemed lighted by a sun captured within stone. The king's status as benefactor might be confirmed by gold panels etched with his name on the high altar. This demonstrated that Frankish royal authority was endowed by both divine favor and material prosperity. In addition to being an act of piety, a growing nobility that lived in homes decorated with gold and silver and employed teams of craftsmen to fulfill their opulent tastes was also encouraged by this wealth. In order to use it to support a military campaign or a succession claim, many families saved gold as political capital. Gold in vaults was never static in Gaul. It flowed like a river of electricity, maintaining coalitions while also igniting disputes. However, despite this brightness, shadows began to appear. Despite its abundance, gold was still reliant on governmental stability and long-distance trade routes. The flow of riches could be slowed if a vital port is blocked or if an enemy takes control of an area that produces luxury goods. And the act of showing off such wealth started to draw jealous looks from gangs of free warriors who were prepared to risk everything for a piece of the loot. In addition to jealous eyes from nearby kingdoms, contemporaries remember this as the Merovingians' real golden age. not because the land was completely peaceful, but rather because there was a feeling that wealth and power had peaked, that every partnership, every structure, and every celebration shone with gold. However, the far side could only slope downward, just like every other peak in history, and the greatest mysteries are frequently concealed by the most brilliant treasures, because they open up completely new and enigmatic chapters in the Merovingian story. When they disappear, are buried, or become legends. Out of all the legends of lost or faded Merovingian treasures, there was one instance in which the gold actually made a comeback. Childeric, Clovis's father, was discovered in 1653 in his tomb at Tournai, Belgium. This discovery served as dramatic, physical evidence of the dynasty's wealth and power in its early years. In addition to shedding light on a time long forgotten, the tale started when a worker unintentionally ran into a burial chamber located far below ground. The glimmer of metal instantly flashed back. Searchlight penetrated the darkness, exposing hundreds of gold and gemstone objects that had been left undisturbed for more than a millennium. There were objects at the center that were tied to the king's identity. A beautiful cluous base, a spearhead inlaid with a gem, and a sword with a gold hilt. The most fascinating feature, however, was the 300 tiny golden bees that were expertly created and perhaps previously stitched onto the king's crown or cloak. This ancient symbol is associated with power, rebirth, and royal authority. Numerous Byzantine solidi, evidence of commercial and diplomatic ties that extended beyond Gaul, even before Clovis's time, were found beside the gold. Unquestionably, the owner of the tomb was identified by a gold signet ring bearing the inscription Childeric Regius, King Childer. A saddle, helmet, armor, embroidered riding boots, and other grave goods painted a picture of Childeric as a Germanic war leader and a Roman imperial-style emperor. These burial items were arranged to illustrate the idea that gold was a link between this world and the next. These jewels were buried with the king, guaranteeing his ongoing power and dignity in the afterlife, rather than just to show off wealth. The golden glow appeared to confirm that Merovingian strength continued beyond death in the damp, chilly solitude of the tomb. However, Childeri's tomb story took a tragic turn. As a diplomatic gift to the Holy Roman Emperor, the majority of the riches was conveyed to Vienna after excavation. Nearly all of it was taken from the museum and thrown into the Seine to cover up the crime in 1831. More than a century later, historians were unable to examine the hoard in its entirety because only a portion was recovered. The beginning of children's gold's transition from truth to folklore coincided with its most glorious return to the world. As brittle relics of a whole legacy, what remains today a few golden bees, the signet ring, and pieces of weapons are on exhibit in museums. They are more than just artifacts from archaeology. They serve as a reminder of the splendor and transiency of Merovingian gold. Furthermore, even in its unfinished form, Child's tomb serves as a gateway to a more significant query. Where are the other valuables if there was only one grave? When will the Meon kings and queens' remains be discovered? If Childeric Item has shown that Merovingian gold could be discovered again after over a millennium, then there are still royal tombs with unsolved mysteries somewhere in Europe. The Merovingians preferred discreet graves, sometimes in remote royal cemeteries, and other times right next to newly constructed churches. in contrast to dynasties that constructed imposing monuments as ostentatious announcements to future generations, because gold and grave valuables were usually the focus of avaricious hands. This prudence was not only a matter of tradition or religious practice, but also a preventive measure. According to modern archives, royal funerals were held with a solemn ceremony, although the exact location of the grave was rarely revealed. The final resting places of kings and queens are only mentioned in passing by Gregory of Tours, one of the most thorough chroniclers of Merovingian political life. This might have been a conscious decision to conceal the information. Alternatively, it might have been oral knowledge that was strictly kept within a very small group of people. During the chaotic 6th and 7th centuries, when succession, conflicts, and battles were ongoing, a royal tomb's remains and the wealth buried with them were protected by being hidden. According to recent archaeological studies conducted in Soissons, Metz, Paris, and other locations, there may yet be undiscovered crypts beneath the floors of certain old churches. They follow the customs of royal burial in terms of architecture, construction materials, and spatial layouts. However, the majority are still unexplored, in part because of the enormous resources required for large-scale excavation, and in part because of worries about upsetting sacred locations. The enigma has been maintained by local folklore. In addition, 2 archaeological hints. A story about a Merovingian king who was buried with a golden chariot to continue his journey into the afterlife may be found in lore. A queen buried in a gold-embroidered cloak with hundreds of gold pieces strewn all over her body is a legend in northern Burgundy. The potential that some unknown graves may contain wealth comparable to, or even greater than those found in Childeric's tomb is fueled by these stories, even though they are impossible to confirm. The disappearance of these graveyards represents a historical as well as an archaeological void. Important hints regarding ancestry, diplomatic ties, and even previously undocumented goldworking techniques could be revealed by the finding of an intact royal burial. Questions that have persisted for generations may be resolved with the use of DNA from the remains, inscriptions on burial goods, and the artistic style of artifacts. However, their last resort might be to remain silent. These graves have withstood religious turmoil, violence, and pillage for millennia. They are like 2 sealed time capsules that, when opened, could reveal long-standing secrets as well as brand new ones, possibly appending our entire conception of the Merovingian dynasty. They continue to be an integral element of the golden legend of the dynasty. For this very reason, treasures resting in silence, awaiting the day they come to life. Imagination and mythology start to meld together from the gaps left by archaeology, tying fact to fantasy. Surviving artifacts cannot verify any Merovingian treasure reported in historical chronicles. Some of the most timeless tales are only preserved in oral tradition that is passed down from one generation to the next, embellished with ever more fantastical elements with time. In the Ardennes, they talk about King Dagobert's army being concealed in a secret cavern that only opens once every 100 years when the moon and stars line up. Figures wearing golden robes stand watch at the entryway, neither ghostly nor alive. It is stated that anyone who attempts to steal the gold without permission will be lost in the mountain forever, as if they had never been there. Numerous expeditions have been drawn into the depths of the forest by the story, but all have returned with vague reports and the specters of those who say they saw something they can't quite explain. According to another legend, along the Lear, a Merovingian king ordered the entire royal treasury to be thrown into a woodland lake in the final days before he was deposed. According to locals, there are still subtle golden glimmers visible beneath the water's surface on moonless evenings. Many have made an attempt to dive for it, but the majority come up empty-handed, and some never come back. Some legends are more politically incisive. According to one account, some of the royal treasure was smuggled out of the capital by loyalists and stashed away in monasteries or hidden underground vaults when Merovingians started to rise and the Merovingian power declined. According to the legend, this trove held not only cash and diamonds, but also historical records, trade maps, and even holy artifacts that, if discovered, could tip the scales of power. According to this story, some Merovingian gold may still be kept in monastic archives under the protection of centuries-old silent vows. The interesting thing is that these tales are not unique to Belgium or France. There are still rumors that Frankish gold entered southern Germany and Lombardy, Italy, as part of military expeditions and was quickly buried to keep it out of enemy hands when defeat was imminent. According to some sources, these vaults were sealed with antiquated devices that would only open when the real heir returned. Such stories are handled carefully by historians and archaeologists, who make a distinction between the tangible proof of excavation and the cultural significance of legend. However, the very lack of conclusive evidence is what makes these tales more enduring than dry, factual accounts. Merovingian gold is perceived by the general populace as more than merely precious metal. It is an assurance of the potential for an accidental discovery or the eventual revelation of a long-kept secret to change the course of history. And the golden light of the Merovingians still shines in its own unique way at this liminal space between reality and fiction, not just in the artifacts on exhibit in museums, but also in the thoughts of those who think that a treasure is still hidden deep within the ground or hidden behind an old door, waiting to be discovered. Reality is much harsher if myth can sustain the radiance of Merovingian gold in the mind. Some treasures ended up in the hands of thieves in the smelter's fire, or just in the coffers of a new government, rather than drifting into the hazy world of stories. When that occurred, history lost the stories that had once been attached to the priceless artifacts as well as the items themselves. As was previously indicated, the most well-known loss is still the treasure found in Chilrewis's tomb, where almost all of the artifacts discovered in the 17th century were taken in 1831 and thrown into the Seine to cover up the crime, even though it only represents a little portion of the Merovingian story. This incident serves as a metaphor for a greater reality, in ways the future will never be able to recover. A large portion of the dynasty's golden legacy has disappeared. However, disappearance was not limited to the modern era. Every power struggle, conflict, or succession, even within the Merovingian Age itself, had the risk of the royal treasury being dispersed down into coins or transformed into ceremonial garb for the succeeding court. In the process, these items' provenance was lost, and they were reduced to anonymous parts of the victor's army. Upheavals in politics and religion also contributed to the treasure's dissolution. When rebellious lords were vanquished, their gold was frequently given to them as war booty by the monarchy, was seized and given to the troops as a reward. Many golden artifacts were concealed in churches or monasteries during religious battles to prevent looting, but they either disappeared with the people who fled into exile or were bartered away to safeguard them from foreign powers. There were even more subdued disappearances when the actual power shifted to the palace mayors. Records from the 7th and 8th centuries reveal periods when the circulation of gold coins fell precipitously. Once included in royal inventories, some ceremonial items just disappeared from the records without any explanation as to how or why. Historians are left to hypothesize because of these gaps. Did they intentionally move gold into the hands of the new power brokers through well-managed political transactions, or was it lost to war? When an artifact made off Merovingian gold appears in a private collection or on the antiquities market, scholars wonder not just where it came from, but also how it disappeared from history before being taken or sold in secret. Some might have been official regalia, while others might have been a part of buried hoards. These stories usually only persist as rumors because there is little legal evidence to support them, dangerously balanced between speculation and actuality. Even more important than the actual collection is the loss of these treasures. It has a direct impact on our comprehension of the Merovingian world. Each lost gold piece is a component of the greater image of economy, artistry, and power that has been obscured. And after those fragments are gone, the void is filled with conjecture, myth, or perhaps made-up tales intended to ease the grief. The plot changes after this. In the Merovingian state, gold served as a political and diplomatic instrument, in addition to being a commodity for show or pillage. In order to fully understand its significance, we need to examine how the court utilized gold to uphold and increase its power in the intricate rituals and covert agreements that took place behind the scenes of power, as well as on the battlefield. The church served as both a place of worship and a storehouse of wealth and treasures, a sacred treasury that had the ability to tip the political scales in the Merovingians' power structure. The relationship between the throne and the altar was complicate. Gold was the strongest bond that held the two together more than anything else. Gold became the common language of this union as soon as Clovis became a Catholic. In addition to being a wise political investment, monarchs sent gold to churches and monasteries as a token of their devotion. An altar covered in gold, a relic with elaborate carvings, or a crucifix covered with jewels. All of them made clear that the dynasty not only supported the religion, but also protected the church's material wealth and reputation. Worshippers sensed the presence of God and the king who had brought that light into the room. When they entered a room that was ablaze with the gleam of precious metal, royal gold did more for the church than only adorn houses of worship. It made it possible to construct and decorate buildings, increase the power of bishops, and transform monasteries into hubs for book production and craftsmanship. To protect gold from theft or loss during a conflict, the king may even deposit it in certain monasteries, which served as holy banks. These locations were safe havens and bargaining chips when politics changed because of their religious authority. There was no one-sidedness in the relationship. Gold was also employed by the church to bolster regal power. During coronations, the golden crown, golden cross, and chalice on the altar gave the impression that God had blessed the throne itself. The populace believed that to oppose the king was to oppose the sacred order. The dynasty was shielded from direct threats by this imperceptible yet incredibly powerful shield. But there were dangers to such intimacy. Bishops and monasteries with enormous gold stockpiles might become autonomous centers of power when a king's political influence declined. In other cases, they might go against royal interests by using these riches to negotiate with adversaries or finance groups. Records indicate that church riches were occasionally surreptitiously transferred to palace mayors or influential lords who had the ability to change the dynasty's trajectory. Church gold may be loaned to fund military battles or back a party, whereas royal gold was sometimes provided to the church in exchange for political support during internal power struggles. As a result, it became difficult to distinguish between secular and sacred gold. Sometimes the altar's golden illumination concealed secret bargains made behind closed doors. Broadly speaking, the gold-church connection was a fundamental reality of the Merovingian period. Spiritual and secular authority were always intertwined. Both depended on gold to maintain their status and power. In addition to reminding everyone that the dynasty's political strength was rooted in the economic and symbolic power of this precious metal. Gold in the church might lead the soul towards faith. Additionally, the flow of wealth between the church and the monarchy changed as the 7th century. The balance of power would be in the hands of whoever held the gold. The narrative then shifts to a new era where gold was used as a weapon by people who weren't members of the royal family to change the Merovingian dynasty's destiny. Gold was more than just a money symbol or a way to buy commodities in Merovingian politics. It was a soft weapon that could change the balance of power more quickly than an army could. Swords and soldiers were the obvious weapons on the chessboard of power in the 6th and 7th centuries. But wealth was the lubricant that kept everything in place and, if removed, stopped the machinery of power completely. Gold was the means by which Merovingian rulers converted possible enemies into allies. If given a golden necklace, a gilded weapon, or a large sum of money, a border chieftain may change from an enemy to a frontier protector. The exchange of gold was frequently regarded in peace talks as a material commitment that obligated both parties to uphold the agreement. Envoys carrying chests laden with shining tramesses left the royal court shortly after the signing of numerous treaties. More generally, gold was essential to maintaining the nobility's allegiance. A lord who was awarded a portion of the campaign's gains, or the authority to levy taxes along a profitable trade route, had every incentive to stick with the monarchy. But allegiance might swiftly erode if that gold flow war stopped. The cause of a rebellion is sometimes condensed into a few words in modern histories. The treasury has nothing in it. Gold was also used to exert influence and control over information. Those who influenced the king's public image, such as monks, court historians, and chroniclers, were frequently rewarded with land or wealth. They reciprocated by writing annals that extolled the dynasty's virtues and gave the populace and foreign courts the impression that it was an unstoppable force. In these situations, gold turned into the ink used to write history. However, this weapon had two sides. Major Decius, the palace's mayors, discovered how to utilize gold to expand their networks of influence as the king's actual power declined. Individuals like Grimwald or Pippin of Herstal established a patronage system that ran parallel to the monarchy by giving nobility direct access to gold or the right to large profits. The Merovingian throne gradually lost most of its actual power. As the scales started to shift in their favor, gold permeated the succession process as well. If a prince had enough riches to purchase the backing of the army, the church, and nobles, he could become king, even though he had little title to the throne. A rightful heir without gold, on the other hand, might find it almost impossible to retain the throne. This element led to several violent conflicts and fatalities, highlighting the fact that in Merovingia, the capacity to control the flow of precious metal was a true test of strength. Gold served as a means of preserving short-term harmony with nearby powers on the global scene. It was not a show of weakness to send riches to the Lombards, Avars, or any Scandinavian tribes. Rather, it was a means of buying time and maintaining internal strength while keeping the borders peaceful until the balance of power changed. Wealth might be used in place of blood in the diplomacy of bedtime from every perspective. Gold was never a static asset in Merovingian hands. It was a stream of vitality that kept coalitions strong, quelled disputes, and occasionally roused undercurrents that rocked the throne itself. And that current would find its way into other hands once it started to flow out of the king's grasp. Those with the cunning to utilize it to change the kingdom's entire set of rules. The Merovingians' golden current was no longer limited to the movement between lords and the royal court. By the later part of the 7th century, it started to move along the three axes of power with increasing force. The mayors of the palace, the church, and the crown were men who oversaw the government apparatus, but were becoming increasingly comfortable acting as de facto rulers. Gold served as both a temporary glue to hold alliances together and a sword to break them apart as soon as interests changed in this power struggle. Gold had been a link between the monarchy and the Catholic Church since Clovis's reign. In exchange for the clergy's approval and blessing, the king sent churches gold structures and priceless metal relics. However, as the palace's mayors ascended, they also came to understand that the path to ultimate authority went beyond the battlefield and past the altar. They progressively encroached on an area that was long thought to be the royal prerogative. By donating jewels to powerful bishops or pouring gold into key monasteries, the church was forced to make meticulous calculations as a result. Even if such loyalty infuriated the monarch, a monastery that was lavishly sponsored by a mayor would become his natural partner in a power struggle. Bishops used gold, which might come from anyone prepared to pay the price, to build new churches, incresidiuses, and solidify and manage their own personal dominance. As a result, the balance of religious power changed. In the past, the unification of the throne and the altar was symbolized by the coronation ceremony with the golden crown and gilded cross on the altar. Such emblems could now be used to convey a clear message during festivities supported by the palace's mayor. In the name of the religion, he could also assert legitimacy. In many areas, gold was donated to ensure direct control over the church's finances, in addition to providing spiritual support. The building of chapels or the copying of sacred texts could be financed by a strong mayor. Merovingian monarchs had to double their efforts and double their spending to retain the church inside their sphere of influence, with the implicit stipulation that these institutions serve his political interests. In clerical decision-making, this competition transformed gold into the decisive vote. Instead of depending on customary allegiances, a bishop who was granted wealth and privileges from both sides would carefully consider which patron would provide the longer-term advantage. Furthermore, the Church's professed spiritual principles were inexorably brought into the world of practical calculation when gold emerged as the decisive component when taken as a whole. This was a time when gold not only maintained the connection between the secular and thesacred, but also made it a point of contention. Gold was pumped into the same system by the palace mayors and the crown. In an attempt to tip the scales in their favor, both undermined the throne's reputation as the only source of power and paved the way for people outside the royal line to move closer to the end objective, displacing the Merovingians both in name and in deed. The flow of gold that had previously been controlled by Merovingian kings started to find a new master as the 7th century gave way to the 8th. Thepapine family's palace mayors. The Carolians would eventually be known as the lineage history. Their strategic location within the royal administrative apparatus, which included managing the treasury, collecting taxes, allocating war booty, and supervising royal estates, gave them influence before the crown did. Every gold stream coming into and going out of the realm was directly accessible to them. As the mayor of both Australasia and Neustria, Pippin of Herstal was a shining example. He controlled the realm's 2 biggest commercial hubs by liberally rewarding his army, providing financial support to devoted nobles, establishing key monasteries, and presenting valuables to powerful bishops. Pippin utilized wealth as the glue, holding his network of power together. Each penny he distributed did more than merely ensure allegiance. It reduced the Merovingian king's sphere of influence. This change happened slowly but steadily. Initially, the king's name continued to appear on the gold allocations, but the mayor chose the actual supply and its path. A squadron of soldiers was paid, a monastery was given reliquary, or Annibal was given territory. It was obvious to all who had actually signed the check. Internal gold trade channels were diverted to Eurasia, Carolian-controlled areas, their favored monasteries, and the homelands of their closest allies. The important thing to remember was that the Carolingians did more than just hoard gold. By hiring talented artisans, buying the best horses and weaponry, and keeping a mobile, well-equipped army that was prepared to face any challenge, they reinvested it in power. In the meantime, the Merovingian monarchs lacked the financial means to impose true authority and increasingly depended on formality to maintain their reputation. The turning moment was the ascent of Charles Martel, son of Pippin of Herstal. In order to maintain a contingent of elite cavalry, the same men that defeated the Muslim armies at Tours in 732 and stopped their advance into Gaul, he utilized gold. In addition to securing his military reputation, that triumph made the Carolians the genuine guardians of the realm, both militarily and economically. Although the majority of the gold on exhibit had been sourced, prepared, and distributed by Carolian hands, The Merovingian king continued to wear the crown during festivities, even though they were still officially referred to as the kings. Their influence could be seen in lavish feasts, military expeditions, and significant religious ceremonies. The populace eventually adjusted to the fact that individuals in charge of the gold flow behind the throne now held actual authority instead of the throne itself. The key to changing the authority structure lay in capturing the gold. In addition to being a gesture of piety, Carolingian funding of monasteries served as a means of establishing political and economic hubs that were completely under their authority. As the Merovingian rulers were pushed more to the periphery, each coin that passed through this network strengthened the ties between the church and Carolingians. By now, it was more a matter of when and how Carolingians would replace the Merovingians than if they would. Both the gold and the authority to determine the future of the entire kingdom had changed hands. The Merovingian monarchs were left with nothing except the gilded shell of the ceremonial, a golden light that was hollow inside, but nevertheless brilliant to the naked eye, reflecting a power they had already allowed to elude them. Carolingians replaced the Merovingian monarchs in power without a loud, decisive coup. Rather, it happened gradually and steadily, like a giant river changing its course, and it was impossible to stop. A coin, a treasure, or the ability to collect taxes never went back to the old system once they had entered the new network. And that network was fully under Carolingian control by the middle of the 8th century. Initially, the Carolingians took care to maintain appearances. The king's name was still used to record gold distributions, and rituals were held as if the monarchy still issued directives. In actuality, however, the mayor of the palace oversaw the origins of gold, from tributes and trade duties to war booty. Gold-receiving military leaders, monasteries, and aristocrats were all aware of who had actually signed their prize. Because of this, loyalty was now linked to the source of the wealth that kept them in power rather than the royal title. Within the monarchy, the flow of gold was likewise restructured. Prior to being dispersed from the center, gold was first concentrated in the royal capital. It now passed through a network that was decentralized. Its nodes are found in areas controlled by reliable allies or in Carolingian land. Australia developed and became the logistical center for the distribution of gold. Key strongholds acted as checkpoints, regulating the flow, and patronized monasteries functioned as safe havens. Carolingians never allowed gold to stay idle, which is what made this system so successful. By purchasing warhorse, commissioning weapons from the best workshops, paying the salary of a mobile cavalry force, and financing the development of border defenses, they approached it as a revolving investment. Each investment simultaneously strengthened territorial security and broadened the network of allegiance. Religion was likewise under control when gold was in control. Once royal gold-receiving churches and monasteries now survived on Carolingian sponsorship. The church found it hard to abandon its real sponsors once this supply became their lifeblood, the authority to bestow spiritual blessings over time. After the Merovingian crown's exclusive dominion was divided, it was discreetly acknowledged that the Carolingians were just as worthy of power, if not more so. The Merovingian rulers, meanwhile, were progressively reduced to ceremonial positions. They rode at the front of processions, attended banquets, and appeared at coronations, but they no longer controlled the origins of gold, which meant they were no longer in charge of the kingdom's destiny. Loyalty to the king became a right for the nobility. The generosity of the Carolians was essential to their survival and success. The gold network was so perfect by the middle of the 8th century that the last step was to replace the throne holder. The throne was reduced to an empty seat and served merely as a front for the continuous transfer of power when gold, the ultimate symbol of authority, had left Meon hands and settled securely in Carolian control, and that facade would be taken off when the time was right, exposing the new system the Carolians had been subtly establishing for decades. Not only did the remaining Merovingian gold lose its monetary worth when it left their possession, but it also lost the significance that had been built up over many generations. Once an emblem of the monarchy and a physical connection to the ruling class dating back to Clovis, the royal treasury was now political loot. It was not simply inherited by Carolingians in order to support their new narrative that they were the legitimate heirs, deserving of both the crown and the money. They purposefully changed it. Instead of being burnt, many of the most symbolic items, such as the golden cross, crown, ceremonial sword, and cathedral decorations, were used for ceremonies under the new government. The story that went with them had changed by the time they showed up. A Merovingian king's crown was now portrayed as the crown of the Frankish realm as a whole, disassociated from any particular royal ancestry. The sword that had formerly represented Merovingian power became a representation of Carolingian triumph over a period now characterized as feeble and antiquated. Not every golden legacy retained its original shape. In order to create new coins with Carolian symbolism and images, a portion of the wealth was melted down. By converting assets into circulating currency, this fulfilled both a functional and symbolic function. It was a conquering of memory as well as cash. Religion was also affected by the change. Under Carolingian patronage, churches and monasteries that had previously housed riches granted by the Merovingians were now protected. Over time, the original donors' documents and inscriptions were either disregarded or changed with new names. The tale of the hand that gave it was quietly relegated to obscurity, even though a gilded chalice or relic covered in jewels might still be seen shining on the altar. However, complete destruction was not the result of this usurpation. The unintentionally guaranteed the Merovingian jewels' survival through centuries of turmoil by preserving and reusing many of them. Some artifacts that were kept in the new royal treasury managed to avoid being lost in civil wars or plundered. They had lost or changed their original story. History's perception of the Merovingians was also altered by the reinterpretation of the gold. The idea of the do-nothing kings, or kings, who sat on the throne while others ruled in their place, replaced the communal memory of a prosperous and powerful dynasty after their outward emblems were removed or given new meanings. Once evidence of a golden era, gold was retold as the just prize for more worthy successors. However, even after being reinterpreted, Merovingian gold had a lasting impact on European royal craftsmanship, art, and beauty. The careful etching, the close-in patterns, and the combination of gold and jewels, these persisted throughout Carolian literature and the succeeding dynasties. The Merovingian legacy did not disappear in this way. It blended in with the common cultural current, hiding in plain sight, like gold that shines through a new coat of gilding. From this point on, Merovingian gold enters a new phase in which it is no longer only owned by one dynasty, but rather serves as a resource for constructing the winner's legacy and subtly transferring its aesthetic, technological, and symbolic significance to future generations. The history of Merovingian gold did not end when it joined the Carolingian treasury. Its unique aesthetics, craftsmanship, and creative sensibilities, on the other hand, kept spreading and blending in well with the wave of medieval European art. The Merovingian golden hand stamp can still be seen in following generations' sculpture, jewelry, and ceremonial items, like a silent thread connecting a cherished present with a lost past. The Closen method was one of the most well-known legacies. Thin gold strips are used to divide a metal surface into tiny compartments, which are subsequently inlaid with glass, jewels, or colored enamel. Cluis was a symbolic language under the Merovingians, not only a decorative method. Each animal motif, such as the wolf, warhorse, or hunting bird, represented authority, strength, or protection. In addition to inheriting this ability, the Carolians enhanced it by using it on crosses, crowns, ceremonial weapons, and even the elaborate covers of illuminated gospel books. The Merovingian color scheme had an equally profound impression. Warm gold combined with sapphire blue, garnet red, and glass enamels, cobalt blue. In addition to being visually arresting, this contrast has multiple levels of meaning. Framed in gold as a representation of divine illumination, red stands for strength and sacrifice, and blue for faith and eternity. This palette was kept by Carolingian artists and is hence characteristic of early medieval royal painting. The Merovingian influence was shown in jewelry in the form of elaborate elaboration, raised pattern necklaces, rings, and brooches, as well as jewels set in continuous, solid panels. The craftsmanship preserved its richness of surface detail, and the perfect balance between form and the reflected light of gold, even as shapes changed to mirror shifting fashion. Despite being produced decades or possibly a century after the collapse of the Merovingians, artifacts discovered in Scandinavia, Italy, and England nonetheless exhibit a strong stylistic connection, indicating a vast network of artistic interchange. Religious art also continued to be influenced by Merovingian art. Carolingian relics, chalices, and processional crosses frequently combined the vibrant intricacy of Merovingian craftsmanship with the grandeur of Byzantine style. The lines avoided stiffness and were gentle and flowing, creating a somber yet welcoming appearance. In certain instances, these items became a tangible and symbolic link between the two dynasties, thanks to the gold that was transformed from the Merovingian treasury. The aristocracy was not the only group affected. The Merovingian style was modified by folk artists to create jewelry and home goods for the wealthy. They kept the same spirit of color, harmony, geometric shape, and attention to exquisite detail, even if they reduced patterns and substituted bronze or gilded alloys for genuine gold. Merovingian aesthetics thus permeated everyday life and went beyond the limits of courtly authority. From the standpoint of art history, Merovingian gold was more than just a lost gem. It served as the aesthetic basis for many of the artistic accomplishments of the Middle Ages, enduring in each inlaid stone, each etched line, and each brilliant reflection that flickers in candlelight. The hands and eyes of its artisans persisted, speaking across ages via creations that outlasted the dynasty that produced them. Despite the term Merovingian being relegated to the periphery of official history, if Merovingian gold had a profound effect on ecclesiastical and royal art, its influence on medieval European craftsmen was even more pervasive, flowing from one generation to the next, like an underground stream that carried trade secrets, techniques, and aesthetics. The development of a whole manufacturing system, a network of artisans, and technical standards that extended throughout the continent are all part of this story, which goes beyond the creation of opulent goods for kings and queens' working centers. 4 gold and gemstones arose under the mayor of Indians in key areas, including Paris, the Metz, Soissons, Raz, and towns along important rivers. In addition to the royal court, these workshops catered to local aristocrats, monasteries, and even international customers. Methods including surface engraving, repousse, hammering motifs from the back, and cloisonne, filigree molding designs from fine gold wires, were standardized and made into an art form. Through trade, political unions, and the migration of artisans, these techniques then made their way to England, Italy, and the Nordic region. The way the Merovingians treated gold as a malleable substance was one of their most notable characteristics. They made delicate, detailed, yet long-lasting creations by combining gold with jewels, colored glass, pearls, and enamel, instead of producing bulky, heavy masses. This method had a direct impact on Carolingian, Anglo-Saxon, and even Viking metalwork, as craftspeople used it to create jewelry and ceremonial items with intricate details and minimal weight. Another important legacy was the system of training for craftsmen. The organizational framework of Meave goldsmith workshops sometimes foreshadowed subsequent guilds, master artisans, journeymen, and apprentices. Through oral and practical instruction, skills such as alloying gold to attain the correct color and fitting gemstones for the best light reflection were transmitted, creating a long-lasting craft heritage. Many Merovingian practices survived wars, political upheavals, and drastic changes because of this concept. Meave artisans were also quite good at restoration and recycling. They were able to disassemble, melt, and reuse the material without lowering the value of previous gold items that were damaged or became outdated. In addition to reflecting a practical attitude, this technique gave gold a continual life cycle, guaranteeing that it was constantly being used for ceremonial, political, or private purposes. Merovingian features and themes are still present in numerous Carolian and subsequent artifacts for this reason. They were made from the gold of past times, literally. They also had an impact by tying together a global supply chain. The same pieces included glass enamel from Byzantium, pearls from the Red Sea, jewels from India and Sri Lanka, and gold from the Mediterranean to get supplies. This called for not only exquisite craftsmanship but also business acumen and diplomacy. Later dynasties adopted this approach, which combined indigenous aesthetics with exotic materials and foreign techniques to create one of Europe's first international craft styles. In a broader sense, the Merovingian craft legacy encompassed both technique and mentality. Gold served as a bridge to connect people, places, and power, rather than being inner. The basis for the great flourishing of precious metal art in Europe from the 9th to the 12th centuries was laid by the seeds of this style and expertise that spread from little workshops along the Seine or the Rhine to far-off places. Because of this, the hand and eye of Merovingian artists can still be seen whether examining a large church cross or a subsequent royal crown. They ensured that their legacy would endure in every minute detail by transforming gold into a common language of beauty and power. The Merovingians' valuables are now dispersed among European museums rather than remaining undamaged in royal coffers or hidden tombs. Every artifact represents a piece of the once complete picture of power. In addition to demonstrating the period's exquisite craftsmanship, the surviving gold, jewelry, weaponry, and ceremonial items also provide hints that aid in rewriting the history of a dynasty that has been marginalized for a long time in official records. A variety of Merovingian golden gemstones are on exhibit at the Louvre in Paris under gentle lighting, with enough space between each item to allow it to sparkle on its own. After over 1,000 years, cloison brooches that were formerly attached to royal military uniforms or noble cloaks continue to shine with sapphire blue and garnet red. If you look closely, you can see that the tiny gold cells fit together so snugly that the seams are almost undetectable, an enduring tribute to craftsmanship. A few items from children's tombs have survived and are kept in the Royal Museum off Marymont in Belgium. The few surviving pieces from the 1831 heist. The children's Regis gold ring is still whole, its wording as crisp as if it had just been crafted by a jeweler. There are presently only a few dozen of the renowned golden bees connected to the grave. When grouped together, however, they continue to resemble a ceremonial cloak that was previously glowing in the ritual light. Jewelry and ceremonial weapons found from noble burials make up the majority of the tiny but well-curated Meroving collections at the British Museum in London and Wegermanisches Nationalmuseum, Nuremberg. Necklaces adorned with emerald and swords with scabbards and hilts decorated with gold and gems. These were status declarations rather than just ornaments. Surprisingly, a large number of these discoveries originate from areas distant from the political center, demonstrating that Merovingian influence and networks of trading extended further than previously thought. Church and monastic archives still hold some of the best preserved Merovingian antiquities. Golden crosses, chalices, and reliquaries that were originally given by Mian rulers are still protected here as holy artefacts. In addition to their tangible worth, they are enshrouded with a religious sacredness that makes entry challenging. It is a unique chance to see the golden light of a bygone era whenever such an item is displayed in public. However, research is hampered by the spread of Merovingian artifacts. Historians and archaeologists must put together evidence from a variety of sources, comparing craftsmanship, examining metal alloys, and cross-referencing styles to demonstrate provenance, as they are not able to study a single treasure trove. The procedure resembles putting together a jigsaw puzzle with certain pieces permanently missing. Nevertheless, there is a special strength in what endures in museums. These items are subtle reminders of a time when gold was valued not merely for its monetary worth, but also for its artistic, religious, and powerful qualities. Every item is a little window into a world that existed over a millennium ago, a realm in which gold reflected not only light but also the people, stories, and aspirations that molded the Merovingians' past. If the strewn-together pieces of the Merovingian gold story are kept in the vaults of museums today, then there are innumerable secrets hidden beneath Europe's surface that have not been discovered, and a contemporary wave of searching has been triggered by the very mystery surrounding their existence. A journey in which advanced technology, expert archaeology, and the daring spirit of individual treasure seekers combine to create a complex, multifaceted image. Archaeologists use a methodical and patient approach to this work. To identify possible locations, they use medieval documents, old maps, and irregularities in the soil layers. These days, modern technology is essential. High-powered metal detectors can discover remnants of gold or precious alloys. Ground-penetrating radar GPR can find tombs or subterranean structures, and aerial lidar scanning can reveal subtle changes in the environment, including the ghost outlines of structures that have long since been covered by dirt or trees. With the use of these instruments, a number of long-forgotten Merovingian graveyards have been located in areas such as Champagne and Lorraine. However, the majority have not been excavated in order to preserve them. The field of private treasure seeking, albeit a contentious one, contributes to official archaeology. They are frequently driven by a combination of excitement, discovery, and the allure of mythology. Some discoveries are the result of pure luck, like the 2014 discovery of a set of Merovingian gold jewelry in a Belgian field by a hobbyist using a metal detector. Nevertheless, there are also accounts of regret when illicitly retrieved objects lose their scholarly context, making them nearly useless for study. Merovingian gold is more than just financial gain for many academics. It is essential for addressing more significant inquiries: the actual size of royal wealth, the extent of trade networks, the interplay between religious and secular authority, and the causes of the disappearance of several jewels. Our understanding of this era can be altered by even the smallest new discovery. However, the search is far from simple. Numerous possible locations are hidden beneath private property or contemporary infrastructure, necessitating intricate financial and legal considerations. Others are in national historical zones or religious preserves, where excavation is practically impossible. Additionally, the threat of illegal digging never goes away. For a small amount of gold, looters are willing to ruin archaeological context, causing irreversible harm to science. Nevertheless, technological advancements and global cooperation are giving people optimism. In addition to recovering gold, interdisciplinary initiatives that integrated geology, history, archaeology, and DNA research promised to rebuild the entire image of Merovingian culture. Perhaps we may have to rewrite a chapter of Europe's so-called dark ages if an undiscovered royal tomb is eventually unearthed and a bounty of knowledge and material richness is discovered. In this sense, the modern search is about recovering a communal memory that is buried deep inside the earth, rather than just chasing glittering objects. And if that golden light ever makes it back to the sun, it will reveal not just the richness of the Merovingians, but also the modern human endeavor to bring the many pieces of a story that has been developing for more than a millennium back together. Gold has a power that is hard to describe, regardless of the time period. In addition to being a material object, it also represents wealth, power, permanency, and temptation. That appeal is heightened by Median gold. It is associated with an era when the shine of this rich metal permeated early medieval Europe's governmental, religious, and cultural structures, rather than being limited to the throne. The physical properties of gold itself contribute to its allure. It doesn't fade or tarnish, and it doesn't change much with time. When a Merovingian gold brooch is discovered over 1,000 years later, the light it reflects is nearly identical to the day it was created by the goldsmith. The present and history are directly and unmediatedly connected at that instant of witnessing its radiance. Few other materials can provide such a feeling. Merovingian gold, however, is more than just a commodity. It is the treasure trove of tales. A series of questions are raised by each artifact that is found. Who was the owner? Which roads did it take? Will it go from a far-off mine to the royal treasury via the hands of a ghoulish goldsmith? Was it presented during a coronation, traded during peace talks, or interred with a warrior when he died? The finder becomes a direct participant in history as each question opens a door to a whole realm. The absence is also what makes it appealing. The majority of Merovingian gold has been lost, melted, stolen, or concealed. What is left is merely the tip of the iceberg. Curiosity is stirred by that gap. How wonderful the unseen must be if this is all we can see. Because of this very deficiency, every new discovery becomes a momentous occasion for archaeologists as well as the general people, who are still captivated by the idea of a hidden treasure and the desire to recover it. On a symbolic level, Median gold is a mirror reflecting the greatest aspirations of humanity. It talks about wealth, bolstering power, incorruptible matter, ensuring endurance, and the artisan's touch, preserving beauty. Gold still has an innate appeal in the modern world, when worth is frequently expressed in financial markets as unseen numbers. You can touch it, feel its weight, and know that it has traveled for centuries to get to you. The paradox that gold embodies is what makes it so heartbreaking. It both bears attention to the frailty of power and serves as a symbol of absolute power. Europe used to admire the wealth that the Merovingian monarchs possessed. However, the internal degradation was unabated by that bright light. Gold is changed from a simple item to a reminder by that tale. No matter how brilliant, all power is interchangeable. Because of this, Merovingian gold is not limited to museum exhibits. It flourishes in the mind. It travels from historical record to book, from truth to legend, from tomb to museum, and it captivates in new ways everywhere. And the sense that something is still out there, a tale not yet told, waiting for us to discover it, may be its greatest attraction rather than the matter of who will own it. Once hidden away in old tombs or on exhibit behind museum glass, Merovingian gold has transcended archaeology and history to become a living emblem in popular culture in the current period. The picture of the long-haired monarch's treasure is no longer limited to historical accounts. It has permeated video games, movies, books, and even the flourishing field of conspiracy theories on the internet. Archaeological finds like Schilderic, the Fun's tomb, captivated the public's interest as early as the 19th century. Newspapers at the time used almost magical language to describe the bounty. A golden glow emanating from the ground, accompanied by royal symbols never previously seen. The foundation Formian gold as a literary subject was established by these striking pictures that were ingrained in popular consciousness. The enigmatic treasure associated with a dynasty that official history has concealed. The had made their way into historical mystery literature by the 20th and 21st centuries. The Merovingians were at the center of ideas about royal bloodlines, the Knights Templar, and treasures that the Vatican was hiding because of works like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the Da Vinci Code, despite their contentious historical veracity. According to these stories, Merovingian gold is not just a source of material wealth, but also the secret to religious and political mysteries that have the potential to upend the entire course of European history. This image has also been strengthened by film. The greatest prize in historical dramas set in the early Middle Ages is frequently a golden treasure. A sense of mystery and authority is evoked in fantasy films through the employment of ceremonial swords, Merovingian crowns, and artifacts influenced by close craftsmanship. The idea of a dynasty that is both majestic and secret is directly metaphorically represented by the Merovingian, a character that is depicted as possessing enormous hidden power even in the Matrix franchise. The video game industry has quickly drawn inspiration from this source. Merovingian artifacts are frequently reimagined as rare objects and rewards after finishing challenging tasks in video games such as Assassin's Creed. By doing this, the Merovingian name is able to reach a younger audience, adding to the folklore surrounding their past. Merovingian gold has become the subject of several conspiracy theories on the internet. Some people think the treasure is still there, complete, and is being kept hidden by dynastic descendants. Others assert that the Vatican or other secret organizations took it in order to hold on to control. These stories, which combine historical accuracy, dramatic flair, and the deeply rooted human need to unravel the mystery, continue to attract sizable audiences despite the paucity of supporting data. Because the Merovingians' gold symbolizes both prosperity and a historical void, it is easy for them to become a cultural figure, a time frame that the winners rewrote or simplified. Weak bits of data might be spun into a whole tapestry of intrigue. In that emptiness, which is a fertile environment for imagination. Therefore, Merovingian gold is not limited to a museum exhibit in popular culture, shining, elusive, real, and magical all at once. It is alive as a figure unto itself. As the narrative comes to a close, Merovingian gold still sparkles subtly after more than a millennium. Its splendor endures in novels, movie frames, and the human imagination rather than being restricted to treasures that are housed behind museum glass or concealed beneath layers of ground that protect their secrets. That golden light reminds us that every dynasty, no matter how brilliant, is based on a foundation that can change with time and human hands. It represents both tragedy and glory, the strength and fragility of power. We have followed every strand of gold from its introduction into Gaul, where it became the lifeblood of the Frankish economy, to its transformation as a political tool on the European chessboard and its shining in royal ceremonies. Additionally, we have witnessed its shift ownership, undergo reinterpretation, and repeatedly disappear from human control. Sometimes only echoes are left in folklore, while other times pieces of artifacts are left behind. Myths, plots, and carefully constructed tales are interwoven with archaeological facts to create a network that makes that golden light both near and far away, real and unreal. We can learn a lot from this Merovingian gold. It first demonstrates how wealth and power are inextricably linked. Real authority changed along with the flow of gold as it passed from royal hands into the palace mayors. Second, the symbol of gold has two sides. It can be used to assert rank and bolster legitimacy, but it can also be used as a tool by a successor or as the object of ambition. Third, the demise of material legacy demonstrates that historical memory is not always accurate. It frequently contains stories that are chosen, altered, or added to meet current demands. However, the capacity of Merovingian gold to unite people across time may be its most lasting worth, rather than the metal bars or the jeweled decorations. Our eyes can still light up when we see a gold brooch that was made over 13 centuries ago, as vividly as the day it was originally recounted. A story of a hidden treasure can pique interest today. Gold turns into a dazzling thread that connects us to the people who once lived, fought, planned, and dreamed under the sky of Europe's dark ages, in the enormous void between the past and the present. As we have seen, this period was not as gloomy as its name implies. However, the narrative might not be finished yet. There may still be gold fragments that no one has touched hidden beneath the dirt in sealed archives or unknown pages. A random discovery could one day fundamentally alter our understanding of this dynasty, like a fresh beam of light hitting a diamond and bringing forth a previously unseen hue. And the question will still be there on that day, which is the greatest treasure, the lost riches, or the wisdom we discovered while looking for it. I appreciate you sticking with me till the very end of Meon Gold, the hidden treasures of the Dark Ages. Please share your ideas in the comments section if you felt this narrative was interesting and would like me to carry on with these historical excavations. To ensure you don't miss the next chapter, click the like button and subscribe. There are still plenty of locations where the golden light of the past can shine, and I'm excited to explore them with you. Thank you for joining Secret Historian on this extraordinary journey into the warnings left behind by those who vanished. If you believe the past still holds wisdom, if you know deep down that history was never a sleepily waiting, subscribe now to Secret Historian.